Jason, you also have permission to admit people?
Yes, I do, and I am.
Okay, then I don't have to worry about that. Let me double check what is on my screen for a second. That's fine. All right, so since I don't have any prepared content, I'm just going to talk to a couple of things. Let me share my screen. This one, I think. Yep. And I'll make this bigger in a second. Okay. Let's get rid of that. All right, so I guess one quick announcement. DSC 3.2 was GA, was it last week, Jason? I don't remember exactly now.
Yeah, it was last week.
Yeah, you want to post the link to your blog post in the chat?
Yeah, I sure will.
At the same time, 3.3 Preview 1 came out, I believe also last week. And one of the new things in there, ignore what's on the screen. I'm going to talk about this later. This is something I'm currently working on. And what you're looking at is this is just VS Code with the opening the repo, the DSC repo. So I'm trying to find resource, registry, this one. Oh, I need to, wait, was that one merged? Let me double check something here. Let me go. I thought that PO was merged. I might have to rebase to pick it up. No, it must have been merged, right? Yeah, it was. Okay, so this will be interesting because I'll probably hit some merge conflicts. All right, let's just see what happens in real time. Oh, fine. Check this in for now. Let's see, updating adapter. All right, and then let's rebase. Yeah, all right, well, I'm gonna hit this anyway, so I'll just, you can watch me do a quick, oh, is this gonna be quick? I think in this case I need to set both. And there's going to be three, there should be three. Since a registry list. And oh, I see. It's because I made a different change. Oh man. All right, let me do it differently. I'm gonna do this later. Let's abort this. It's gonna take a lot more time to unwind this problem. Don't save. Instead, I'm going to push my changes, get back to that later. Let me just check out main branch. This will be easier. Set. Just to my main branch. All right. So let's go back here. All right. So I'm not going to build it because that's going to take time, but I can talk to it. So there's a new resource that was added called registry list. So basically it works the same as the existing registry resource, except rather than, if you have like multiple registry changes, you want to make it the same, or read, or whatever the case may be, you can now have it as an array. And the best way to look at this is in the tests. So for example here, whereas before you would have multiple instances of the registry resource, and then each one would have their own key path and values and whatever the case may be. In this case, you just have a single top-level property called registry entries, and then you can just have as many key paths and values as you want. Now, obviously, as you can see here, if you have multiple values under the same key, you just have to repeat it, right? And now the benefit is that I think from a configuration doc perspective, you can have all your registry stuff in one place. But also from a performance perspective, it doesn't have to spawn the registry resource every time. It just spawns it once and it takes care of all of them at the same time. So I do recommend if you're using a registry resource to switch to this registry list one. Obviously, there's only available in 3.3 preview 1. We're not going to backport to 3.2, although it's compatible with 3.2. Hopefully, you're just testing as 3.3 anyways. All right, so that covers that. Any questions before I talk about the other thing, which now I need to get back to my other branch, which I called registry adapter. So this, I think, is actually more interesting.
Steve.
Hi, go ahead.
Yeah, quick question. What are some of the design decisions that resource authors have to take into account when they make like a list resource themselves?
Good question. Yeah. So that's a good question. So in general, if you look into, for example, Windows Service versus like Windows Firewall, right? So in the firewall case, we also have a list type resource. Where is it? Firewall rule list. Again, this is in 3.2. A lot of it is just going to come from the engineer's initial thinking of how people use it. And as you saw in the registry case, there's no harm at all in having both a single one and a array one. In the case of registry list, like in terms of the code, fundamentally, it's just reusing the same schema as a single registry, but it's in an array, so it just has a loop. I mean, fundamentally, the amount of changes needed to support registry list was very small. You can look at the PR on the repo if you want to see that. But what I would say is, like, for example, in the case of service, because I wrote both of these, service doesn't have a service list today. We could create a service list if there's a need for it. But my thinking is that most people aren't touching a lot of services at the same time. Whereas in the case of firewall, especially for set, you're probably going to apply multiple firewall rules at the same time. Similarly, I think for, let's see, Windows Update, I think is also a list. Yeah, because you probably want to either find out all the updates that should be applied, haven't been applied, so you have a list of them, or you want to forcibly install a bunch of updates at the same time versus one by one. So it is kind of something, I guess, from experience. But again, I want to call out there's no harm in having both a singleton. So in this case, we could have had a Microsoft Windows Update resource as well as an update list. There's no conflict at all having both of those. The key thing here is we do standardize on the suffix list to give an easy indicator when you do DSC resource list. I think I have a working build here, maybe. Right. So if you do DSC resource list, then you can easily identify which ones take an array versus a singleton. By the way, whenever you see me run DSC on my system, it's going to be a little bit slower because this is a debug build, not the release build, which has performance optimizations. And you can kind of see there's also a ton of test resources from the repo. All right. Any questions on that topic, or Gijs, did I answer that completely?
You're good, thanks.
All right. So let me talk about this new thing I'm currently working on, which is I'm going to start with Windows Personalization resource. So this will be a resource that comes with it because I needed something real to test against. All right. So as I was working through the registry stuff, and then, or rather registry list resource, because there's a bunch of internal partners using a DSC v3, and they shared some of their configurations to me, and I just saw like a ton of registry access. All right. Here's what I would say in general is if you can avoid touching the registry directly, that is always preferred. If you can have an abstraction over the resource, over the registry, that is much better than touching it directly. All right. Now, there are cases where you can't do that or don't want, I don't say don't want to, can't do it. Then, of course, that's why the registry resource exists. However, I was trying, as I was looking through some of the internal people using DSC, here's one example that I found is they're doing a bunch of personalization. So there's a bunch of Microsoft documented registry settings for basically Windows Explorer and Start menu. The docs call it personalization. This is why I called it that as well. And you can kind of see the key path here. It ends in personalized, right? There's a whole bunch of. In fact, this file doesn't have all of them, right? I only wanted to pick up enough of different cases to test my adapter. So what you're seeing here is a registry manifest for an adapted resource with working against the new what I'm currently authoring, a registry adapter. So the purpose of this is that you can have a single file. So unlike the PowerShell adapter, for example, where you have adapted resource manifest and then you have the PS1 or PSM1, in this case, it was more beneficial to have the content for the resource itself inside the manifest. So there's a new, so instead of a path, there's going to be a new property you can have an adapted resource manifest, which is content, and this will be given to the adapter. And adapters will have to support this explicitly. So PowerShell adapter won't support this. But in this case, what I wanted to be able to do is have some schema defined for the registry adapter so that you can easily author a DCV3 resource that only touches the registry, but is presented as like a DSC resource that the end user doesn't have to know is touching the registry, right? So in this case, there's a couple of things that are needed. These are all, again, these are all documented by Microsoft. But for example, in the when you're authoring a configuration using this resource, you're going to say app uses light theme, so you don't have to worry about these implementation details. And then this will be a Boolean, which I'll show down below when I go to the JSON schema, and you're going to provide true or false. But in the registry, whoever wrote this decided, instead of making it a Boolean, because Boolean types do exist in the registry, they made it a 0, 1, right? So there, and it's a D word, so it's a number. So basically, I need to know, the registry adapter needs to know, hey, what is the actual type that it needs to put into the registry? What is the path, and what is the value name, and then what the values are. So that's why you see this kind of repeated. The true false one is common for this, but then there's this binary case as well. So this one is how to enable or disable or hide certain things like documents, download stuff from showing in the start menu, right? So in this case, we don't want to expose this GUID to the user. So this is basically enum that is more human friendly, so you can do stuff like user profile network, whatever. And then, but the adapter needs to know, hey, here's the actual binary content that needs to be put in the registry to make this take effect. And interestingly enough, let's see. So there are some other one. I presume multiple different engineers worked on this stuff in Windows, because there are ones that actually have an actual Boolean. So that's what this is. And then for some reason, this person chose to represent 0 and 1 as strings versus as a number. So it's like the worst of all worlds, in my opinion. But this needs to be handled as well. So basically, the way this will work is the adapter will look at the value provided on the input JSON or YAML, and then apply the actual appropriate registry value type in the registry. Anything else in here? There's also another enum example. All right. So for a author who wants to leverage this in the future, again, I'm hoping this will show up in preview too, is you need both this definition of content, and your content also needs to match your JSON schema. So you have to write some JSON schema for this to work, because the adapter won't know what is allowed and what isn't allowed for your resource. So in this case, these are all the properties. You can kind of see this, again, ignoring what actually gets stored in the registry, what's presented to the user, that this is a Boolean. This visible places thing is an array of strings, but the strings have these specific values that are allowed. And here's another one where this is multi-monitor taskbar grouping mode. It has 3 potential values, but if you look back in the code, what's actually stored in the registry is these numbers 0, 1, and 2. Even though these are strings, so actually I probably need to put this as quotes to make this work correctly. All right. Okay. Anyways, so this is coming, and one other thing that came up in my mind is like this personalization one. Like, I don't think it makes sense to ship it as part of DSC platform itself. So I think the working group, one thing we may have to discuss next time is, does it make sense to have like I don't want to call it a resource kit, even though that was kind of like the name of this call, but something like that where it's just a bunch of resources you can optionally install. But I'll worry about that later once I get this working. But you can kind of get the idea, right? So if there's other things in the registry, I think Windows Update Agent settings are also documented publicly by Microsoft. I'll probably have that one later as well, and whatever else I can find in the registry. So you'll get resources. The other benefit here is like because you have the JSON schema, if you're using like VS Code against the JSON schema, then you'll get these tooltips that tell you these descriptions of what these settings mean. So you get other niceties. Questions or comments on this? All right. And by the way, one other thing I may do in the future with this type of model is also for WMI. Because in WMI land, you're going to get a whole bunch of less, well, how should I put this? Like, you know, if you're familiar with WMI, you'll see a bunch of stuff like win32 underscore, sim underscore, and stuff like that. And I think the way we want to present it in DSC is to not worry about the WMI and sim specific stuff and rather present it kind of like this where we have a mapping. So I think it would make sense in to have something similar as update the WMI adapter to have a similar model where you can author DSC resources that just touches WMI in a more human-friendly way than what we have today, which requires a lot of knowledge about WMI. All right, that's pretty much the end of what I have, unless there's a question or comments about anything. Maybe we can turn this into AMA. Nice.
Yeah, quick question. I was going through the announcement itself, and there was like this fictional example on Tommel.
Yeah.
Can you mention something about it or explain something about it?
I think, Jason, isn't that built off something that Mikey had done?
Yeah, Gijs, this was something that Mikey and I were putting this together, and the code was something that we just invented it, as far as I know. I mean, I'll ask Mikey, but I don't think it came from anything in particular.
Okay. I can still do a quick demo, by the way.
Oh, yeah, go ahead if you want. We got plenty of time.
I think I demoed it already a couple of calls away, but we decided to move it to the community. So let me see if I can share my screen. Is it visible?
Yes.
All right. So I'm trying this out in the SQL Server DSC one because I wanted to see how it will behave. But we decided to. So we just launched a new DSC resource authoring module from the DSC community, and currently I'm running it locally actually. So I think many are familiar with the whole standard layout of either script-based or class-based DSC resources. And this module mainly targets on class-based DSC resource because that's the way forward when you want to use it through the DSC engine itself. But I think everyone is familiar with running the build automation script that comes from this sampler template, right? But I also included, and this sits within the module itself, and I'm currently testing it out locally. But this is the task itself. So if I'm now building the module itself, everything gets scaffolded and you get one big module. But it now also includes the adapted resource manifest. So whenever I'm adding that now to the DSC resource path, you can easily list them out, but you can also get the schema itself, which is not possible when you do it. What is it, explicit through the adapter? I guess so.
Yeah, I guess you can put it that way.
Yeah, so this is pretty easy because you can easily hook in the task in the build YAML. I think I configured it. Let me see. In the build one. So if you have like this default scaffolding project, you can hook it in and it creates adapted resource manifest. And the beautiful thing about this is when it's packed and it's installed in the PS module path, it will also automatically be discovered, because that was also shipped within 3.2, I think.
Yeah, that should be in 3.2.
Yeah. That's basically it. Any questions?
Let me make sure folks who are not as involved in the project understand, like the adaptive resource manifest concept means that DSC can find it much faster and easier than waiting on the PowerShell adapter to find it, right? But you also get the benefits of having the proper schema for the resource if it's authored. So Gijs, is the goal here to eventually have all of the DSC community resources updated?
Yes.
Cool. Looking forward to that.
Not all the community ones have class-based DSC resource yet. I think that's still like an initiative going on by
Okay.
the community members itself. But yeah.
I wonder how well Copilot could transform those into class-based that aren't today.
Most likely.
Yeah. I mean, for the
Yeah, but I
script-based
think
ones, it's really transforming them off into a class and then having the class methods call the script functions.
yeah, but I think it's a good one if like the RDK itself comes in, right? That will be the baseline on converting script based to class based, because then it inherently uses all the types, I guess,
Yeah.
from the RDK,
Sure.
which makes it more future proof. But that's opinions.
Yep. Right. Anything else? Or any questions or topics people want to have covered? Marvin, then go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, so apologies, I've been out of the loop for
All right.
a minute here.
No problem.
So we have we use DSC to do configuration of our GCP instances or whatever automation.
Okay.
Anyways, it's all written in Windows. It's all written in PowerShell DSC.
Okay.
So I need to start looking at, since this is where we're going with it, I need to start looking at converting all that stuff over to DSC 3. Where and the last time I did look, all I saw as in the way of samples or tutorials was something written in Go on like the
Oh.
PowerShell DSC samples thing.
Yes.
Is something updated? Is there some updated documentation somewhere that I'm missing?
No, not yet. And let me ask you this: what programming language would help you most?
Honestly, in all honesty, I think for us, it's not like they're gonna do. It's not like they're ever gonna. In our organization, they're never going to go, oh, let's use DSC3 on Linux. So that's probably not going to happen. It's probably going to
Sure.
continue to be a Windows thing.
That's fine.
So it could probably stay written in PowerShell or something like that, or C# even. I guess I'd like to just start looking at getting that stuff converted. At a level so that we can at least start looking at it and see if it makes sense to make the switch, because obviously I know we could probably still just do Windows PowerShell DSC, but I'd like to at least give an option here.
Yeah, and the benefit is even if you convert them to V3 compatible, it'll still work in the old world, right? So you're not breaking anything.
Then so that works. Is there like, so like where's that documentation at? Because it doesn't seem to be on the
Documentation is a little bit
GitHub.
behind. I'll be honest, I think the best examples are probably in the DSC community, Open DSC whoever Heist is doing his work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't know if you have any links just available, Heist, to provide as samples.
If you're looking for doing things with .NET itself, for example, then I would look in the OpenDSC repository because that's by Thomas Nitu. He's also one of the working group members. He created a library for it. I think you can easily crank out a CLI and you have like a comment-based DSC resource. If you're looking for just PowerShell resources, what Steve mentioned, I think like the class-based and the script-based still work as today, whereas class-based will be the focus. And what I just demonstrated is to get more of the IntelliSense, the schema, and speeding up the discovery of resources. So
what I'm hearing is I should be trying to convert what we have to class-based resources. Is that what I'm hearing?
That would be that'd be the first step in recommendation at this point.
Okay. All right. Easy enough. I can work on that. Thank you.
And again, I want to call out that if you confirm the class base, it'll still work with your existing model, right? Like you haven't quote unquote broken anything, but it does allow for new scenarios in the future.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Marvin,
I'd love to hear if you had any challenges, feel free to bring it up here in the next meeting, right? And we can work through that.
Okay.
Marvin, this just got merged, so that's in the main branch. That might be a starting point for you.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Anything else from anyone? If not, we can, I guess, end this early. All right. I guess for Heist, you have something or?
No. I want to say have a good one then.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks,
See you.
everyone. All right. See you guys next time.
Bye.